What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Tro Bro Dude, and what a win for the Sixers. Game 5 in Boston to take the 3-2 series lead. I had Mike Chiodo and Dhwani onto the podcast today to talk about this massive win, probably the biggest of the process and Embiid era. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you about our fantasy sponsors, Underdog Fantasy, the newest and best place to play fantasy sports and win big prizes. And I finally broke the streak on Underdog. I finally got a pick right after what seemed like 2 months of me never getting picks right. I finally get the Jalen Brunson pick right. He scored higher than 25 points the other night. And then last night, before Sixers and Celtics, I picked higher on Embiid's point, higher on Marcus Smart's point, and hit on that once again. And you can sign up today using the promo code SLOP, that's SLOP, to get a $100 deposit match. We're going to do some picks right now using their pick'em. You can also do their fantasy drafts all throughout the playoffs. It's a ton of fun. But let me pull up right now their pick'em page, and we'll make some picks. And I'm on a little bit of a hot streak. Got 2 in a row. They're not doing a promo tonight, so I'm going to have to pick 2 straight up right now. And the games that are on tonight are the Knicks and the Heat, and then also the Warriors and the Lakers. So Jimmy Butler's been a little bit down recently in terms of scoring. Ever since he got injured his ankle, he hasn't been going off quite as much. But playoff Jimmy, closeout game, could potentially have a big game tonight. Running through some of the other names here. Jalen Brunson was obviously the guy that got me over the top last time. They're going to need a big performance out of him if they are going to want to win this game and potentially come back from being down 3-1. Kevin Love. Kevin Love has been cooking with the outlet passes in this series. I'm going to go with higher on his points, rebounds, and assists. This is just gut feeling shit. I'm just riffing here. 15.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I don't know what he's been doing recently, but that feels like a good pick to me. And I'm going to trust my gut now. And then we're going to pick one more from the Lakers and the Warriors. Obviously, Anthony Davis and the Lakers have been absolute. Yes, he is their best player now, by the way. Better than LeBron James somehow. They have been crushing the Warriors so far. The Lakers have been really getting random performances, so it's hard to feel out who's going to go off for them. Like last game, it was Lonnie Walker. They've had a great performance from D'Angelo Russell, Dennis Schroeder. They've had guys kind of all over the board, but this is back against the wall shit. I think Golden State's going to run a. Last time I did this with Steph, obviously he kind of came up short, but I think that this is going to have to be a huge Steph night for the Warriors to have any sort of chance in this game. He's actually been cooking kind of recently as a playmaker. They've kind of turned him into that. He's been running the pick and roll a lot more. He shot incredibly poorly last game. They're back at home. I'm expecting a huge game from Steph. So I'm going to go higher on his points, rebounds, and assists combined as well. That's 44. He hasn't really been hitting that recently, but if they want to have any chance in this game, he's going to need to just have a historical game. So put $10 on that. You can win $30, $100 deposit match. They're doing tons of promos all throughout the playoffs. Sign up for Underdog today. It supports the podcast. It keeps the lights on, and I would really appreciate it if you have not already. That is promo code SLOP for a $100 deposit match, and enjoy this episode. We'll be back with a third episode. We're doing 2 Patreon episodes this week. So I will be back on Friday. Sixers lose, Sixers win. We're going to be here, and we're either going to be talking about the Sixers advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals or a Game 7 in Boston that will happen this weekend. So enjoy. Peace. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the You Know Ball podcast. I am your host, Tro Bro Dude, and originally when I asked these 2 people to come onto the podcast, I had no anticipation of what was going to happen last night in Boston, but I woke up this morning feeling 1,000 times better than I had ever anticipated. Returning to the podcast, we have Dhwani. What's going on, Dhwani?
What's up?
And we also have Mike Chiodo, a.k.a. Uno is dead. What's going on, Mike?
You got to keep down Uno. Uno thrives off of negativity.
I think the whole team does.
At this rate, I mean, before the playoffs, we did say at one point we needed to make the playoffs so good Tobias Harris fucking sucks so that he shows up. And everyone on the fucking team, for the first time in the playoffs, I tweeted last night and I said, first time in the playoffs that everyone on the team has shown up. And I had multiple people tweeting at me, this is the first time ever when everyone has shown up in the same game. Can you remember a game where that wasn't against like the Charlotte Hornets on a Wednesday night, where everyone on the Sixers, in the Sixers rotation, maybe minus George Niang, who I barely even noticed except for bad things, showed up and did their part last night in that. That was the best team victory of the process era, I think.
Yeah.
They've never done it when it matters.
Exactly.
The only game that would come to mind a little bit would be Game 6 against the Raptors last year, where they went in Toronto and just killed them. But it was a special moment for me.
Yeah. that holds a special place in your heart. But first round, first off, that's like all the big victories except for maybe that Toronto series from 2019 have all been first round. We're playing the Nets. We're playing last year's Raptors. We're playing the Wizards. There's never any real, like, good victories for this team. This felt like a really good victory. Like, I would say definitely the best since that 2018-2019 season when they beat the Raptors. They had two games where the one game they just kicked the shit out of the Raptors at home, Game 6. And then other than that, it's been all worse teams, not really like guys that are on their same level. To go into Boston and win, it was their first Game 5 win past the first round since the Eastern Conference Finals in 2001. They have not had a single Game 5 win, home, road, no matter what. What's that?
That checks out.
They have been one of the worst Game 5 teams in the NBA for the past 20 years. They essentially never win these games outside of those closing games in Game 1 or round 1. So just to start, first off, I've been a little bit harsh on Embiid. That was an incredible performance from Embiid last night. I just have to give him his flowers up top because I felt as though he kind of did the same thing the game before. But because the Celtics came back and because he was gassed in the fourth quarter and was just getting owned by Al Horford down the stretch in that fourth quarter and kind of needed James Harden to bail him out, it was the only thing that really stuck in my mind from that game. And last night, after Game 4, was Embiid looking gassed, out of shape. But last night, anytime he was on the court, the Sixers were dominant. The Sixers pretty much ran them. I felt like they were completely outclassing them from the jump. The only time that I really ever got scared in that game was the second quarter when the Celtics started to literally grift their way back into the game. And Joel Embiid immediately was like, all right, you want to do a grift off? 3 straight fouls drawn on the other end. Grant Williams in foul trouble and got them just steadied right into halftime. And then in the third quarter, anytime the Celtics would bounce back into the game, the Sixers would just hit a big shot. They never seemed fazed by the moment. They seemed like, honestly, the team that kind of was meant to be there. And like, they've never been that team in this moment. And after Game 4, me and Chiodo, we've been saying all year this team feels different. But the end of Game 4 and going into Boston in Game 5 is just kind of proof of concept about what we've been saying all year.
Yeah, like we knew they were. I've been saying I want the Celtics for 2 months, but deep down I didn't know if they would actually win.
Sure,
because I've said on this pod before, I'm not going to believe they're going to get out of the second round until I see it with my own eyes. It's a concept that's not a foreign concept to me. So just to think about, 72 hours ago, there was like a 10-15 minute stretch where the entire thing was over. It was over. Like I joked about it, but like I was seriously, from like the time where Smart hit that 3 to go up 102-98 to the Tucker N1, I was like discussing Embiid trade packages in my head.
No, legitimately, I was like, okay, well, this is it. Like, Embiid's going to be in Miami next year. I hope we enjoy Bam Adebayo.
Like, it was over.
Yeah, it was very dark.
And I think, honestly, what I said this last night, what this reminded me of, not to go into the Phils, but it reminded me of after Game 1 in St. Louis, where the Phils had this entire cloud of the playoff drought over them all year. You could tell when things got bad, it would weigh on them.
Sure.
And then they go to game 1 in St. Louis. They score like 5 runs in the 9th. They win that game. And the rest of the playoffs, you could tell just the weight's been lifted off of them. That there's just freedom that they're playing with. I think last night reminded me of that. They just look like they're just playing freely, playing fun, playing with confidence. I've never seen that before from them in the playoffs. They were always tight.
Yeah, Dhwani, have you ever seen the Sixers play? Like
No.
the last, if you include overtime of the Celtics game and the like really overtime and then the last 4 quarters, so the last, let's say 4.5 quarters, have you ever seen the Sixers feel as like no pressure really on them, more pressure on the other team?
Absolutely not.
And
it's
you
can't. That game that went to overtime. When it went to overtime, I was like, "It's done. It's over. Like they're gonna lose this. The Celtics are gonna go on like a 15-0 run, and all Twitter sphere is gonna be like, okay, time to trade Embiid. And the process is over. And then they won.
We were on the stream and I was like, I feel like such a fucking idiot for saying that this team is different all fucking year. I feel like such a fucking idiot for buying into it again when we're seeing the same exact collapse.
They bamboozled us again.
Yep.
I was telling people all year they're different, and then you're gonna do this. Like, are you kidding me?
Me and Chiodo haven't been bold enough to really go outside of circle and DMs on some of this shit. Like, we've kind of been like hiding behind the wall a little bit. I had a tweet from 3 months ago maybe. The Sixers were like 17-4. And they, in their last 21 games, they go into Golden State without James Harden, Jalen McDaniels, and Danuel House, and they lose by like 4 points. Jordan Poole, of course, courtside baddies were there, and he went off. But there were, in that game afterwards, the Sixers fans on my timeline, you would have thought that they lost by 50 points, full strength. And I tweeted in my circle, and I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me with this shit. They're at Golden State, the defending champions, and I know they're not as good this year, but like this team without 3 rotation players goes into Golden State, and Joel almost single-handedly drags them to victory in that game, and everyone is acting like they lost, game 7 of the conference finals. Like, I was like losing my mind a little bit, I said.
The Sixers discourse this year drove me insane. Like, they were the best team in the league after December 1st.
Yeah.
And people were acting like every single loss was the end of the world. Mm-hmm. I was getting texts on game 2, texts from like friends in real life that were like calling them losers. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
That's the worst. When your real friends start bullying you about your team, that's when you know it's bad.
And the same group chat. Like yesterday they were texting all game. Funny in the other DM that I'm on Trill, we were being negative. They were all being negative, and I was like, guys, what the fuck are you talking about? This team's different. I've been telling you all year. You don't believe me.
Yeah.
But like you said, I've been wanting the Celtics for like 2 months because I thought this team was different. I don't think I ever said that publicly because I was terrified of the Sixers. I was terrified of the Celtics fans. It's the Celtics fans, man.
I famously wanted to get to the 4 seed to play the Bucks in the second round because I felt like all year I felt like the Bucks were vulnerable. They were the team.
I agreed with you. I thought the Bucks were the better matchup for us, but I also thought that was a loser mentality. Like, you got to go beat the Celtics.
Yeah, and that's exactly what me and Sam have been saying on the podcast all year. Is like, you can't be afraid if you're going to win a championship. You can't be afraid of Boston. You can't be afraid of Golden State. You can't be afraid of Milwaukee. You can't be afraid of Miami. You just got to play who you're going to play. And if you win, that's what fucking champions do. And this team, once again, it's still 3-2. Series is not over. Boston has been, I've joked, I've called them the 96 Bulls when their back is against the wall.
Boston honestly is what people think the Sixers are.
This version of Boston has been... Since they had their, like, do you remember when they started the year and they had, like, the greatest offense of all time when they were shooting, like, 47?
I remember there being a point where I was like, they're going to win 70 games.
It was the way that they were shooting the ball to start the season. We were like, this is literally, we did a podcast early in the year where I dove through the numbers and I was like, this is the best shooting team we've ever seen by a wide margin, like a month and a half in the season. And I was like, they're shooting better than the prime Clef and Steph and Clay Warriors, which will regress a little bit for sure. But if this is sustainable, there's no one that's going to beat the Celtics. They since then, shout out to Will who pointed this out. Since that hot start, they've actually had the 13th ranked offense, and their offense hasn't even really been the problem outside of late game situations. Their offense hasn't really been the problem. They've had the number one offense in the playoffs. It's really been the defense that has regressed majorly, because last year, the thing that they could rely on was taking and making a ton of threes, and then also just having the best defense. Robert Williams isn't the same. Marcus Smart isn't the same. Malcolm Brogdon is so targetable on defense. Horford is targetable on defense. And the Sixers have last night was the game that I've been waiting for them to play. This is the game that I was waiting for them to play since I felt like the tide had turned a little bit for this team back in December and January, when they found their groove. And the big thing for me, obviously Embiid was the best player on the court, I thought. It was the first time in the playoffs that I felt like Embiid was the best player on the court. He was a monster on defense. Absolute fucking monster. And it's so funny to me. I've seen people say that Embiid is overrated defensively, and I've always argued it's the opposite. If anything, he's overrated offensively. He's actually, when locked in, one of the 10 best defenders in the NBA. And like the only big drop center where his team is actually better with him on the court Brook Lopez, the Bucks are better when he's on the bench. And to name a drop center, Rudy Gobert, they're almost always better when that player is on the bench in the playoffs. The Sixers defense with Joel on the court in the playoffs, especially during the non-Harden minutes, would be the best in the league by like 15 points per 100 possessions. They have like a 97 defensive rating when it's Joel with no Harden, and it's like 112 or something when it's both of them on the court. But Sean Bernard tweeted this out. The Celtics are shooting 47% from the floor with Joel Embiid as the primary defender in this series, which is 12.3% lower than expected. And he has been a fucking monster. The Brown and Tatum do not want to challenge him at the rim. He has been just an absolute beast on that end. And offensively, he finally got, like, the game before, I think his numbers were similar. But this game, he was really in a rhythm. He was taking threes. He was getting that mid-range shot. He was getting to the line whenever he wanted. And it felt like this has kind of been the performance that I've been waiting for from Joel. Between him and Maxey, they set the tone so early last night. And it never felt like it was Boston's night because of the fact that Joel and Maxey just were like completely aggressive early on. Not like I needed to see that from Maxey, because Maxey has been the one guy that I've really been worried about. I knew we would have a shooting regression game where he made, like, I literally said on the last episode, I think he makes like 5 or 6 threes in one of the next 2 games. He made 6 last night, but like I expected that. But what was more important to me was the fact that he was making quick decisions when he had the ball. He was getting downhill. He was using picks from Joel. And that was the most important and the best Maxey playoff game outside of that Toronto game where he literally shot like, I think he made like 9 threes or some shit in the first round last year. So I needed to see that from both Embiid and from Maxey. And the fact that they both did that was incredible to see.
Yeah, Embiid's never done that. Like,
yeah,
this was the signature playoff game we wanted to see.
Yep.
Like outside of the first round, like he's had first round games, but like in the second round,
he did have some in the Hawks series, but it's been the same problem. The carrying in the Hawks series was what wore him down by the end of games, and like we've never had the players around him to make it so that he doesn't have to carry the load the entire time, so that like in the fourth quarter he can have some energy left to do what he did to Jaylen Brown yesterday. Like he turned the ball over and then immediately erased the mistake that he made. The energy and the motor from him in the fourth quarter was never there like that before. Yeah, that like it has been this year.
When I say he's never done that, like he's had great second round games. Like I think Game 3 against the Raptors in 2019. He's never had a situation where he went into a hostile environment and won them a game they needed to win. And he didn't win them the game last night. Like
outside of round 1,
everyone stepped up. But they've never done that. He's never done that. They've never gone into a hostile environment and just dominated like that and switched a series, turned the series around.
Yep. Yeah. Dhwani, what did you think when Danuel House was put into the game yesterday. Did you think it was going to... Me and Chiodo, I believe, Chiodo, you've also been on this. I'm not sure. But we've kind of been pounding the table for Danuel House for about 2 to 3 months in terms of he's been good when he gets rotation minutes. Like, when he gets consistent minutes with James Harden, he's been very good. The problem is Doc was playing without James Harden early in the year. Did you think that it was going to make an impact at all when Daniel... I was shocked that he put him in.
I feel like in like playoff situations, like always you're kind of like, what's Doc doing? Like, you always question him because of things that have happened in the past, but it was such a positive surprise. Like, you can't not be happy with the way that turned out. But yeah, I did not expect that.
5 for 7 from the field. What's another thing that kind of swung the game was like, what have the Sixers really been missing in these games where it feels like they've been just as good as Boston, but like Melton can't make transition layups, Tobias can't make transition layups, Maxey can't even make transition layups. Like it really
the small things.
He makes layups.
Danuel House going 4 for 4 on transition layups legitimately changed this game. Like
that's when you knew.
How insane
this is a win.
Is it that your 10th man who barely has played in the last month, who gets thrown into a crazy environment in Boston in this game, energy guy off the bench, transition layups, hit the way that first off, the fact that, and look, I actually, Dhwani just said about Doc with, you never know what Doc's going to do because Doc's kind of a random coach. Like he kind of just throws shit at the wall sometimes and hopes it sticks. Which has been brilliant before.
That's what he said last night. He said, I wasn't planning on doing this. I just got to go.
That's what I'm saying.
Like, he literally was just like, fuck it, let's throw... Because without McDaniels in the rotation, the Sixers are incredibly unathletic compared to Boston. And House at least gives you some of that chaos off the bench that we've really been lacking in these first few games. And those things that you can win on the margins, like literally just hitting transition layups. But the other thing I was going to say is, like, we've seen it work brilliantly before, like Game 2 with Shake Milton in the Hawk series, where Doc looks like a genius because Shake comes in and he's cooking. And we've also seen it go horribly, where George Hill is playing 30 minutes in a closeout game, and the corpse of George Hill is just not making a difference at all for us. And Maxey in Game 6 of the Hawk series, it worked. Like, he's had some swing guys, and he's also had it swung in the complete opposite direction, where he's forcing a DeAndre Jordan or whoever it is. And I've given Doc a little bit of a break just because last year, the Joel injury, I kind of wrote that off as we were cooked once Joel got hurt. Like, I can't really blame Doc for the best player breaking his face. Like, it's just, I can't, although you could argue, as Kyle Neubeck pointed out last night, this is why we don't pull Joel early from games, because they had that fake comeback at the end where they hit like 3 straight threes. And I was like, what is happening? Why are we doing this? But back to the Doc point was like Doc has been totally fine in the playoffs and regular season. If your best players step up and your role players do their job, I really think that it makes the coach look a lot better, and that this roster is good enough to make up for some of the things that Doc might be lacking as a coach. And like last night, I feel as though everyone's been kind of trashing Joe Mazzulla, and like, look, he's done some things that I personally wouldn't do, like switching Malcolm Brogdon onto James Harden every time. I don't know why he's just giving them that switch, because James Harden has Malcolm Brogdon absolutely in hell. And there are certainly things that I think you can make the argument that you should even pull Brogdon from the rotation at this point, or at least limit his minutes. But at the end of the day, if your players are playing, like, Tobias did his job last night. Like, Tobias got into foul trouble early, but he got 10 rebounds. Like, this is what we've been asking for from every player on the fucking team. For Maxey be aggressive from the jump. Joel keep us. Joel and James keep us afloat. James was basically like a distributor last night. Like, he wasn't. Yeah, he took 8 shots the whole game. He was basically just dishing the ball, being kind of, getting us into our offense, setting up Joel, and letting the game come to him. And like, everyone has done their job, and it makes the coach look a lot smarter when everyone does their job. Like, everyone who calls for Doc's head after every loss. I'm like, what do you like? It's first off,
sometimes it's the player's fault.
Not only sometimes is it the player's fault, but also like, and I say this as someone who was very out on Doc at the beginning of the year because I was like, he might have just lost the locker room. Like it felt like when he started the year, we were 1-4, and I was like, he might have just lost the locker room. Like that's the only thing I could think of right now. Like they look terrible, whatever. But at the same time, Joel was playing horribly to start the year, and if your best player is playing poorly, you're not going to win a ton of games. And I've kind of defended Doc from like people going insane, but I really can't get mad at the coach when I feel as though he's been mostly fine this entire year since that slow start.
He's been good, I think. Like I said, there was a point this year where I was rooting against him because I wanted him to get fired, and now I'm a huge Doc.
I love how quickly we swap sides.
He's just funny. He's funny. So
well, look, if we blow these last 2 games on some bozo shit, I will absolutely be back on the fire.
I'll hate him.
Mostly because it's just easy to fire a coach. Like it's not.
I still think he's not a very good coach. He's just funny. So I live with it.
Yeah, it's true. I was gonna say he's probably exactly. Or they win this series and then he gets pantsed by Eric Spoelstra in the next round, and we're like, okay, this is why. But then again, I mean, look, the politician side of Doc, the comedian side of Doc, definitely, dude. The emotional terrorism line is one of the greatest lines in the history of sports.
That's gonna get so much use.
And did you hear last night when Harlan or Miller said something like, Game 4, that's what the playoffs are about. That is emotional terrorism. That's what he must have told Harlan or Miller that. It was like a throwaway line, and I was locked in, so I didn't really say it.
That's so that I can't describe how Game 4 made me feel.
Oh my God, I'm still recovering.
I literally, if you watch every one of our streams, I'm usually, especially during wins, I'm like, Game 1 was, it was like I snorted a line of MDMA. I was fucking on cloud 9. I was loving it. But then in Game 4, because they blew the lead, because I've seen this before, because Embiid was gassed down the stretch, because like it felt like they were going to lose, even when Harden hit that shot, I was like, they lost the game in my mind. Like it felt like a loss.
Because
so
like
broken.
I said, it was over for so long, and in my mind it was just over, that it took me time to be like, wait, it's 2-2. Like this is still a thing. We're still a thing. It
was literally the meme. It was time to watch my favorite team. I'm gonna kill myself. Oh, cool,
nice.
We won. You realized you were like maybe 3 or 4 breaks away from the Sixers blowing a 15-point lead and Embiid getting absolutely owned by Al Horford to go down 3-1, and Jokic dropping 50 to go up 3-1 in Phoenix.
Oh my God.
We were like 3 breaks away from that. I'm serious.
Okay, so what I will say, and part of the reason why I feel as though this series is 3-2 right now, well, for obviously Smart getting the shot off a half a second late.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about it, but like, how many times have the Sixers been on the lucky end of this shit? Like the PJ Tucker and 1 play, Tobias airball. If Tobias doesn't airball that midi, like Tobias airballing the midi in a way kind of swung the game. Because if he just bricks it, Boston gets a potentially transition layup to seal the game. Instead, he airballs it. PJ gets the board, puts it back up, ties the game with the free throw, and then Smart misses the regulation 3. He makes the other one. It's a half a second late. And most importantly, there was about 1 minute and 30 seconds left in overtime. And Al Horford had a wide open 3 that went in and out when Boston was up 1. That would have also potentially sealed the game. Like, the amount of things that have broken in the Sixers' favor in this game, or in this series, just to steal, they really stole Game 1 and Game 4. And Game 3, obviously, Harden played like shit, and everyone but Embiid played like shit in that game, to be completely honest. But the way that those things have broken the Sixers' favor set up last night to keep them in this series and to take the lead in this series, in a series where right now I think the point differential is like plus 28 or plus 29 Boston because of Game 2. Like, the Celtics, when they're making their threes, the Celtics, when they give a shit on defense, look like the better team. But the problem is that just wanes over the course of a series. Like, there's variance with the shooting shit. There's been miscommunications on defense for them. There's been poor execution for them on defense. And the Sixers have basically been the equivalent of what kind of the underdog team. Like, we are basically obviously a better team than that Atlanta Hawks team that beat us in the playoffs. But it has kind of broke similarly in that steal game 1 on the road. Game 2 and game 3 are kind of get right games for Boston, kind of similar to the Sixers in that series. Game 4, you steal with Boston kind of having a little bit of a meltdown in crunch time. And then game 5, you win a huge one on the road. And now it sets up game 6 at home on tomorrow night, Thursday. How do we feel about tomorrow night? First off, who should ring the bell? Can we get Tucker
Just find
Carlson?
a random guy off the street. It shouldn't be
be
anyone that we know.
Alive?
I think it has to be someone in the middle. It can't be like, you can't be like testing the gods and being like, yeah, we're just gonna have this random person. It needs to be someone in the middle. Like
Wanda Sykes was perfect, really, for game 4, because the thing about Wanda was like, one, she's not even from Philly. She's from Maryland. Like, you
can't tell me they're not aware of the. You can't tell me that.
No, they
knew.
Aware.
They knew after game 3, Jason Kelce and Embiid ceremony night that they needed to scale back the expectation. Like, Wanda Sykes is very funny, good comedian. She hasn't been really famous in like 10 years. Like, I can't remember her except for like Curb Your Enthusiasm from like 10, 12 years ago. So like, it was a perfect choice, really.
I think we go with Landon Dickerson.
I would not be mad at that.
He's in the middle. People are going, that's Landon Dickerson, but no one's going to get excited.
I know him. Yeah. National champion.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of someone who would be obscure enough that people would. Landon Dickerson's a good choice. You can't be Jalen Hurts.
Flyer.
You can't.
You can always.
No, absolutely not. Keep him far away.
You can always get a flyer.
Yeah. Any flyer. I couldn't name a single one.
Tortorella, that guy. Danny Briere.
Danny Briere's
son. Those are just names to me.
Chris Pronger. Oh, the 2010 Flyers hold a special place in my heart.
That was the last Flyers team I remember. Yeah. So you can get any one of them.
The 2010 Flyers are too cool. They can't be there. Let's get a modern Flyer guy. Get the Ivan Provorov guy.
Oh my God, dude! All right, so before we get into anything else, this is the end of the free preview of this. We're going to be riffing on some other stuff for the rest of this episode. We're going to be talking more about the Sixers. We're also going to be talking about the Miami Heat. We'll talk about Lonnie Walker, Reading, Pennsylvania legend, and the Warriors, and then our best friend Nikola Jokic as well. So if you want to hear this whole episode, subscribe to the You Know Ball Patreon. The link is in the description, and we're going to do 2 Patreon episodes this week. So you'll get 2 extra episodes this week if you subscribe to the You Know Ball Patreon today.